my sunny one, shines so sincere.
Good morning, Mr. Sinatra.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing today?
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, I'm playing Duke Ellington's and your father's collaboration, playing a version of Sonny. How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Well, fine. Thank you so much to be with us this Sunday morning. It's a beautiful day here. I hope you had a wonderful concerts on Friday and Saturday night. How did it go?
It went very well, thank you.
Great. Let's talk about your tour coming up. You have a big concert, one of the jazz fest, isn't it? As a matter of fact, I had.
Well, that's just a one-night appearance. That's up in Toronto, Ontario.
Right.
And that will be this coming Saturday.
That's great. And is that the sort of an annual event?
That I don't know.
And you're taking. Okay, go ahead.
This is the first time we played this particular festival.
How big of a big band you have when you travel?
It will only be 8 pieces. It'll only be our jazz octet.
Ah, okay. And the venue, as far as playlists, do you have, I'm sure, the mix of the standards and stuff that you compose yourself?
Well, there's not very much of my writing, but we do have a great deal of the jazz standards because it is a small jazz ensemble.
Right.
We are, kind of confining ourselves to that kind of sound.
Oh, okay.
One of the songs we're doing up there, by the way, is the one you're playing right now.
Oh, Sonny.
Yes, that happens to be, coincidentally, in the book.
That's incredible. That's wonderful.
You pick them real good.
So let's talk about the early days. I remember there's a single, and I forgot the title of it, where you performed with your father. You want to talk about those early days? Give us some overview?
Well, there was no single that I performed with my father in the early days.
Right.
The only time on record I ever sang with him was in his duets album.
Correct.
In the mid-1990s.
Right.
And I was on one of those sides.
Okay. Well, and then, one thing that jumped out of all these arrangements and arrangers, Bill May and Nelson Riddle, Neil Hefti, did you get a chance to interact with some of those giants?
Yes, many years, in fact.
Well, tell us about, which one you like their arrangements better, or, I know they're all great.
Different writing styles by different people.
Right.
But I had studied orchestration with Nelson Riddle, who was the standard for Frank Sinatra for so many years. Billy May and I worked together on many occasions, and Neil Hefti never per se did any writing for me, but I worked with Neil many, many times.
Right. And it was interesting. I was watching ESPN, the opening of the tennis tournament, and they picked a beautiful number of your father, and that was a beauty. I mean, did you get a chance to interact with ESPN regarding selections?
No, I did not.
Were you surprised?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, this is U.S. Open, and when ESPN was advertising that, there was a single of your father right at the beginning.
I was not aware of this.
Is that right? And as a matter of fact, I got calls from a whole bunch of our colleagues. They said, "Well, did you check this out? Sinatra for the U.S. Open?" I said, "Really?" And I checked it out, and it was fantastic. Not one of those standards. I forgot what was even the title of the song, but it was great.
Well, that's marvelous. I'm glad to know that some of those people still remember Frank Sinatra.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I know that you know this, but a few years ago, I was featuring some of the early Sinatra and Carlos Jobim sessions that Sonny Burke produced. And it's amazing now. This is one of the hottest box sets, according to a lot of my colleagues who are looking for some of those classics. You want to elaborate on that?
they had worked together. I believe the intent, I was never part of this, but during the 1960s, I believe the intent was that they were going to make at least 2 full record albums.
Right.
They finished the original, which was a huge success, and then they got about halfway through the second album, and I don't know what became of it. It became like a half an album, and then was released with several other selections they had recorded at the time.
You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I got it in front of me, and there are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of standards: one note samba, wave, triste, and all those. And then the rest of it is other standards like Lady Day.
Right, right. They had to get, apparently, I'm guessing at this point, but knowing how record company executives think, they had to get a new release out, even if the entirety of the Jobim intention was not fulfilled. They had to get a new release out at a certain date, so they took what they had and added some extraneous other music they had stockpiled on the record.
Right.
And then, of course, many, many years later, they then put together as a whole collection of Frank Sinatra and Antonio Carlos Jobim. This is really quite a tragedy because Tom Jobim died at the age of like 51. He was obscenely young when he died.
Right.
And he was such a great talent and a nice person, by the way.
And by the way, I'm very happy to see that Rio de Janeiro airport now is named after him.
This I didn't know.
Yes, as a matter of fact,
I do know they have an Antonio Carlos Jobim museum in Rio.
Correct.
Because I have been there.
No doubt.
I don't know about the fact they've renamed the airport.
Yeah, the beauty of it is, as you know, New Orleans Airport is named after Louis Armstrong. And
yes.
When this happened with Jobim, and I, compared, and the parallel between the two, of course, that was quite a interesting sort of a collaboration with your dad. Let me ask you about some of the newcomers to the scene these days. Michael Bublé and some other ones. What do you think of their styles?
They have primarily the old-fashioned style,
right?
And they are developing. It just takes a lot of time to really come up with the integrity of doing it correctly.
Right.
And they are paying their dues. Michael Bublé has enjoyed phenomenal popularity, and he is continuing to develop.
Well, I know that this is good for the youngsters because a few years ago, I remember I was featuring 30 minutes every Sunday, by the way, at 12 noon Central. We do Sinatra with friends. So I do 2 Sinatras and then 2 selections from Nat King Cole, and then we play some Sammy Davis, and then back to Sinatra. And this young freshman a few years ago called, and she said, "Is this person new?" Referring to Nat King Cole. I said no, but it's nice to see that the youngsters are reacting positive to the style of the music that was recorded back in 50s and 60s. So
Nat King Cole, again, in my memory, also like Jobim, has to rest as another tragedy. Nat Cole, this coming February, it will be 50 years since Nat Cole died.
Wow.
And his death came when he was 45 years old.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I recall I was a little boy and my father came and said, Nat is in hospital, and John F. Kennedy called him and wished him well.
Well, that must have been some considerable time because John F. Kennedy had been dead over a year and a half before Nat Cole was dead.
Right, but I guess maybe he was in the hospital at the time. Yeah.
No, Nat was a textbook reason for why not to smoke.
Right,
And
exactly.
Nat smoked himself into the grave
Mm-hmm.
at the age of 45.
Right.
And it never was there a greater tragedy. All the music that we never got.
Right. Did you get a chance to meet Dick LaPalm, his confidant, Nat King Cole's confidant?
No, I did not.
Well, Dick LaPalm, back in 1982, called me. I had no idea who this gentleman is. He called me, very down-to-earth guy. He said, "May I talk to Zia?" I said, "Well, speaking." He said, "Well, my name is Dick LaPalm, and I'm going to send you some promotional records to promote and all that. And I used to be Nat King Cole confidant, so I just took it for granted." 20 years later, and by the way, Dick died last December. And 20 years ago, I think, or maybe 15 years ago, there was American Masters series on public television. So there were the hour and a half American Masters dedicated to Nat King Cole's life. And guess who they talked to? To Dick LaPalm. And
I've never heard the name before.
Mm-hmm. Dick used to be A&R manager for Chess Label in Chicago, who discovered Ramsey Lewis, signed up a couple of famous blues maestros, and what a pleasure to get to know him. And as a matter of fact, he was kind enough to set up an interview with Natalie Cole last year. We did it live on the show as well. So now we go full circle. I told my older brother in Geneva, Switzerland, I said, now we have Mr. Sinatra on the show. So my dad used to play, Mr. Sinatra Sr. and Nat King Cole at home, and it's a pleasure to connect with the family members.
Well, I've never heard the name Dick LaPalm. Nat Cole never worked for Chess Records. He worked for Capitol Records.
No, you're right, but I'm talking about Dick LaPalm.
And his confidant, my understanding was a man named Ike Jones.
Right, but also Dick LaPalm, as a matter of fact, during that documentary, they mentioned him several times, and he was a very close confidant, and he did some arrangement, as a matter of fact, his music at the Sands. If you, I think there's a live reissued CD where they're highlighting Dick LaPalm. So anyway, he passed away last year. Let me ask you this. You played at Ronnie Scott's back in May 3rd of this year in London. How's that club after all these years? That's really a unique jazz club in London.
It is one of the few nightclubs left in the world, and one of the fewer nightclubs left in the world that is dedicated just to the making of jazz music.
Mm-hmm. How big of a club is that? I mean, is it like
it's very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the stage is small. The club itself is quite small. It is in the section of town called Soho over there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it is a very, very nice place with nice people to work for there.
Well, that's wonderful. That I know there are some of the live recordings back in the 60s. I have a few of those where they're featuring local musicians as well. Let me ask you about your 2006 album, That Face. That's a great album. How did you guys come up with that?
There has been very, very little demand for Frank Sinatra Jr. records through the years, and that was just the last one of them. At that point in time, we had accumulated enough music to make into a record album.
And the band is absolutely great.
Well, those are the studio players from Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us some of the trumpeters that are taking the solos? It reminds me of the Capitol Records days.
Well, the one man who did most of the solo work, regrettably, we have lost. He was the first call trumpet player in the Los Angeles area. His name was Warren Looning.
Ah, okay.
And Warren died about 2 years ago, maybe 3. And here again, this has been a very crucial loss. But this was just part of what we were doing. We had the best musicians in the local at the time.
Right. As a matter of fact, he reminds me some of the mute trumpet that he plays. Sounds like Harry Sweet's Edison.
I believe that was the intent.
Great. Great. Next year is the Centennial for your father. What do you guys arrange or planning to do?
I'm sure there will be many things in terms of the honorarium of the 100th anniversary of his birth.
Right.
But as far as I'm concerned, I will be on tour with a new show that we're putting together right now. And it will be, for the first time, audio-visual.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what I will be doing through the calendar in 2015.
Hmm. Are you guys planning to do some reissues of some of those classics from the past?
Are we planning? I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was thinking to ask you whether you guys going to reissue some of those old recordings that maybe.
Well, that's not up to me.
Oh, okay.
No, I have no say in that. That comes from the different companies.
And the catalog still owns by the company, or the family has access to that?
Well, the family has some kind of a. They have an organization that deals with that.
Right.
And I am not part of that organization.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you at the show that the whole channel on XM radio that plays Sinatra, and I listen to it on and off. And your sisters, Tina and Nancy, they host every now and then. That's quite a nice format. Do you get involved with that program as well? No.
They have come to me on occasion to do station breaks and things like that, but that's about all.
Well, it's a nice mix, and every now and then they have some other musicians or singers or balladeers that they come on and they reminisce and they talk about the old days as well. It's a pretty nice sort of a venue.
Well, I agree that that is something that is, as far as I'm concerned, very, very important, is to include other people.
Right.
I have had words with them on occasion in which somebody, I don't know who is calling the shots with that whole thing, somebody insists that all they do is play vocals one after another, after another, after another, and they have finally begun to play instrumental things now and again.
I'm glad they did that. I've noticed that.
So am I, because I don't think it's a good policy to lock yourself in.
No, you're absolutely right.
One particular avenue and never deviate from it.
Right. Tell me about...
That's my opinion.
Tell us about those days, basically after you start helping your father, with the the arrangements or the tours and all that. Can you tell us about those days?
Well, I didn't do anything with the arrangements except make sure that they had remained constant the way they had been when they were all written, especially the famous ones. But I was his musical conductor for the last 7 years that he worked, and it was a learning experience.
And I'm sure you guys traveled to different...
We traveled across the entire world.
Can you tell us whether you were part of that team when you guys went to Egypt and played in the shadow of the pyramids?
No, that was before I came on board. That was in the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't come on board in his company until almost, let me see, when did I start? I started with his company in 1988.
Right. Since Peter helped us to connect with you, let's talk about his dad, Sonny Burke.
Well, Sonny Burke is another man who we lost at too young an age. And Sonny Burke was like a father to me, and he was one of the most brilliant musical minds I ever knew. He was an excellent songwriter. He was a band leader, an orchestrator. He was a great talent. He was called upon by most of the recording companies to mix and master primarily their movie soundtracks and things like that. And he had been, as a young man, in charge of mixing and mastering the great vocal records at Decca.
Yeah.
And his primary client was Bing Crosby.
Interesting.
Most of the Bing Crosby records were, nowadays they call them produced, which is, I don't know what that means. Let's just say that he was the man responsible for getting all the levels of the orchestras and the instruments correct on Bing Crosby's records, all those years at Decca. And finally, in the early 60s, he became available. Apparently, I'm guessing now, his commitment to Decca Records was finally finished, and he became available on the open market, and immediately the people at Reprise Records, which was Frank Sinatra's record company,
correct,
they immediately hired Sonny Burke, and he took over at Reprise. And all of the best recordings in terms of the mixing and mastering were all Sonny Burke. He was just the greatest. He taught me how to do that in the studio. At one point, when I was in my 20s, Sonny actually tried to start his own record label, which he did. He had a record label he called Daybreak.
Oh, yeah.
And I was asked, which delighted me, to be one of the recording artists on Daybreak Records. I was one of his original recording artists. And unfortunately, my records never did anything for his fledgling company.
So have they released those recordings of you?
No.
Well, we'd love to have copies of those.
They were released back in the 1970s.
Right.
But no, not since. The Daybreak Records was ill-fated because it was what they used to call a sub-label.
Mm-hmm.
First, they were connected to RCA.
Victor, yeah.
Then, when that deal went south, then they were reconnected to MGM Records.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I don't know what happened, but now we were getting into the later 70s, and Sonny Burke died, regrettably, in 1980. I was present at his funeral, and this was a great talent lost, and a wonderful man. Wonderful, wonderful man.
The last question I would like to ask you, what do you think of the talk show sort of programs at night? I feel like since Carson and his wonderful band, they faded away. You know, I don't see as much promotion of the jazz and the standards and ballads on some of these shows. What do you think of the available venues these days?
Well, that I wouldn't know because I never watched them, but I don't believe that you should be surprised at any of that change. This new generation of people who are making the decisions for television networking, television programming, and things like that, I don't think too many of them are past the age of 30. And as far as they're concerned, life and music and entertainment began with Michael Jackson.
That's right.
Many of them don't even know who Elvis was. Some of them nowadays are not even familiar with the Beatles. It's just a new generation of people that regrettably have been put into the seat of authority when it comes to doing such things. And jazz music, I'm sorry to say, is something of another era.
No, you're right. As a matter of fact, I saw the last, maybe 10 years ago, I saw, I think blues and jazz combined is less than 5% of the sale of the entire sort of a recording market.
Well, the recording market itself has all but vanished.
Yep.
Because of the fact that nowadays since there is so much computer piracy going on in terms of what happens with the musical product around us, there is no security that copyright violation and copyright infringement and copyright theft is not, in fact, happening constantly on a very large basis. And with this kind of thing in mind, the flow of the recording of record albums has just virtually come to a halt. And I don't know, frankly, what's going to happen for music, for any music, in fact, any style in the future.
That's true. That's scary.
Yes, I'm afraid it is. But then again, it has to do with the fact that many, many years ago, somebody in one of the record companies decided they were going to make it available for people to get their recorded music online in their computers. And one of the record companies, I don't remember which one it was, opened up a computer service at the time, which was known as Napster.
No, I remember that.
That was the first network online computer availability of copyrighted music. Well, whatever record company did this, had this brainchild, as it turns out now, that record company was Dr. Frankenstein, and Napster was the monster.
Right.
And this is where they are today. This is what's happened.
And
they have brought it about, and they have, in essence, cut their own throats.
And so many legal actions against them.
Right, and now, of course, we have streaming and all of this, and so many people today don't want to buy an entire record album.
That's true.
If some album comes around and there's one or two songs on that album they'll just buy those two songs.
That's true.
And this is where we're going. This is what has happened with the recording industry. And the recording industry now, the accountants and the bean counters run everything. And they're just saying, look, it's better for us not to commit to anything.
That's true.
And that's about where we are today.
You know, along with that, one of the things that I'm interested when I get an album, even the new stuff, if there's no liner notes, I just don't even waste my time. There got to be some liner notes so you find out, what was the setting, the musicians, where was recorded, the arrangements, and it seems there's not much interest in that anymore.
Well, now this I'm not familiar with. I haven't looked at any record albums like that in years, many, many years.
Well, I want to thank you for spending Sunday afternoon with us. It's been a pleasure.
I'm sorry that my comments are probably perceived as such a downer.
No.
But I am just answering your questions in the sense of how I perceive where we are at the moment in the world of recorded music. I don't believe it's a very pretty picture.
Well, the styles comes back, new ideas come back. You never know. I mean, God willing, maybe some creative ideas comes back, and we get back in a saddle. It
would be nice.
Oh, absolutely. Well, God willing, we will love to have you back next year for the Centennial and have another round of discussion with you.
Well, I hope maybe I have been of some use to your program. It's very nice to know that somebody still likes this kind of music.
Oh, absolutely. And please tell your sisters that we're holding the fort in Baton Rouge on Louisiana State University Radio for 37 years. I've been
that's very good.
And I never fail every Sunday to play the music of your father and people that go to churches and coming back, and they are saying, man, it's so nice to hear that for 30 minutes nonstop commercial-free.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We want to thank you again, and best wishes, your future travels, and God willing, we'll regroup next year.
Very good, sir.
Thank you so much, and as we say, happy jazzing.
All right.
All right, take care.